Good morning. Welcome to our third Sunday of online worship from First Parish Old Ship Church in Hingham, actually from our Old Ship Parish house. It's good to be together once again, knowing that however much distance might separate us, we are together, and sending good wishes, each of us, to everyone in our community, everyone who's listening, and watching, every one of our dear ones. One or two quick announcements. A reminder that though our buildings are closed, we will continue to find ways to connect online. For example, today, after the service, a Zoom coffee hour. Those of you who receive our weekly emails will find the link to that Zoom coffee hour in that email. And within a week or so, perhaps next Sunday, a Seder, our annual Seder led by Beverly Tricko, will happen at another time from worship. Stay tuned for that. We'll let everyone know through email. So once again, welcome to worship. Music from Christopher, a story from Beverly, prayer, readings, a brief message from me, and at the end, a time to sing together. Welcome. We gather for worship. We gather in the spirit of love and friendship, neighborliness. May we feel our care and concern, our love for one another, no matter where we are, for we are always, wherever we are, connected, our lives interwoven. During this shared time of worship, may those who need comfort find comfort. May those who need inspiration receive inspiration. May those who need to feel the love, now and always. And may the flame of our chalice, flame of truth, of freedom, of community and love, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. May it remind us of all that we share, whether we are side by side or in distant cities. A story. After music.
Good morning. Oh, it's strange not to hear you say good morning back to me.
Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel so alone. Storytelling is such a social thing. This morning, I want to tell you a story from the point of view of a young boy. So I'm going to do a little bit of a transformation here to help you imagine. It's a young boy named Raphael experiencing his first love. All right, R for Raphael. It's the best I can do. Okay. And later, I will probably read this on YouTube for you so you can see the beautiful illustrations. But it was a bridge too far to do that today. On field trips to the art museum, it's me that Jerome chooses for his buddy. And he always holds my hand so tight. That's why I love Jerome. And it doesn't bother me at all. Raphael loves Jerome. I can say it. It's easy. When I say it to my mom, she says, Raphael is... Jerome is very polite, but she never looks him in the eye when she says it. When I say to my dad that Raphael loves Jerome, he says, it's a shame he doesn't play more sports. But I know Jerome is very, very strong. When we have snacks at school, he always shares his with mine. And when people make fun of me, he sticks up for me, he defends me. He always, always chooses me for his buddy, and that is why I love Jerome. I've made up my mind that from now on, every day is for Jerome. It makes my mornings happy from the start, and by lunchtime, we've laughed so hard together our stomachs hurt. And by dinner time, I've stocked up on enough Jerome that I can make it through the whole night without him, and that's important. This morning at breakfast, I burst out, I had the best dream last night. It was all about Jerome. And my dad just stared at his shoelaces, like he didn't hear anything I said. And my mom just packed my backpack and said, eat your cereal, Raphael. It's not like Jerome is a bad word. I swallow my smile and I go to my room to calm down. I stomp around my bed. I stomp around the table. I stomp around in circles until I'm calm. I forget about my mom and dad, and I only think about Jerome, who I know by heart. And I say, yes, Raphael loves Jerome. I can say it. It's easy.
Come and find the quiet center in the crowded life we lead. Find the room for hope to enter. Find the frame where we are free. Clear the chaos and the clutter. Clear our eyes that we can see all the things that really matter. Be at peace and simply be. In the Spirit, let us travel, being open to our pain. Let our loves and fears unravel, celebrate the space we gain. Clear the chaos and the clutter, clear our eyes that we can see all the things that really matter. Be at peace and simply be. Be at peace and simply be.
Come and find the quiet center of what Christopher was singing. Thank you, Christopher. Oh my goodness. A beautiful invitation and beautiful music. We've arrived at our time of sharing joys and sorrows and concerns. Several of you have this week sent to me asking that a candle be lit on your behalf. The first from Abby Diamond Kissaday asks for a candle for her brother David, who lives in Delaware and has pneumonia. Gratefully, negative for COVID-19, but we light a candle of love for healing, for his healing. Rick Matilla, I want everybody to see the candles. Rick Matilla requests a candle of remembrance for Adam Levin, who died on Wednesday at the end of a long illness. This a candle also of deep sympathy for Adam's wife, Gail Nathanson. Rick knew Adam as a former member of the board of Wellspring, where Rick has also served. And so this candle in remembrance of Adam, and a candle of sympathy. Lori Sprague requests a candle of concern for Dawn Vercoloni's granddaughter, Claire Lawson. Claire is 8 months old. She will be having craniosynostosis surgery this Wednesday, April 1st. We add our prayers to hers for successful surgery and healing. And Connie Gorfinkel asks for a candle for those in our congregation who are spending days alone, which for her, she says, have turned out not to be lonely. May that be so for everyone. And I light these two candles for joys and sorrows and concerns deeply felt among all those in our community, all those watching and listening this morning. Candles burn for all our joys, our sorrows, our concerns. Our candles burn for those wherever they may be who are in the midst of the challenges of these days. We reach out, though not with our hands, certainly with our hearts. Then we now pause, slow down, breathe into this moment, into full presence of body, mind, spirit, as we enter a time of meditation and prayer and then silence. Noticing our breath during these moments, more fully present to our surroundings wherever we are, present to the sounds of the day outside our windows, just noticing, present. And from this deeper presence, yearnings of our hearts may arise, our prayers. As each week, first, prayers of healing for those suffering in the midst of these days, whether with illness, financial hardship, anxiety and fear, or with loneliness. And prayers this day and during these days, prayers of abiding gratitude for those on the front lines of COVID-19, healthcare workers, first responders, courageous, everyone. Prayers of gratitude, too, for all those who are keeping us fed, grocery workers, takeout service. Gratitude for pharmacists helping to keep us well, for journalists keeping us informed. Gratitude for legislators, governors, for all those leaders who speak the truth and seek to help. Now we pause in a moment of silence, each with our own prayers of the heart, knowing that we share this time, knowing we hold one another in our hearts, wherever we are. We pause. A few readings this morning. I've been musing these last days, weeks, on love and fear and love. So 2 very brief readings and a couple of not much longer ones on this theme. First, from the Christian tradition, 1 John 4:18, familiar to many. Perfect love casts out fear. Perfect love casts out fear. From the Buddhist tradition, Narayan Helen Liebenson, who is one of the leaders of the Cambridge Insight Meditation Center, this week in something she sent out, quotes the Greek Aeschylus. Aeschylus said, especially in times of darkness, that is the time to love, that an act of love might tip the scale. Then Narayan herself goes on and writes, given our interconnectedness, I think it's so important to remember that although fear is contagious, love is as well. Although we're being asked to keep a physical distance, love has no boundaries. We can reach out in so many ways, which helps others as well as ourselves. It warms the heart to know, it warms our heart. It warms the heart to express kindness, and warmth is certainly needed now. In that spirit, one final reading, some practical advice from an Episcopal priest, Barbara Taylor Brown. She writes, "The best thing to do when fear has a neck hold on you is to befriend someone who lives in real and constant fear. The best thing to do when you are flattened by despair is to spend time in a community where despair is daily bread. The best thing to do when sadness has your arms twisted behind your back is to sit down with the saddest child you know and say, 'Tell me about it. I have all day. Tell me about it. I have all day.'" Here end the readings.
I may speak with bravest heart, and have the gift to all inspire, and have not love, my words are vain as sounding brass and hopeless pain. Though I may give all I possess, and striving so my love profess, but not be given by love within, the prophets turn strangely thin. Come, Spirit, come, our hearts control. Our spirits long to be made whole, that inward love guide every deed. By this we worship and are free.
The gift of love. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you. Well, a few words from me. Does perfect love cast out fear? That's what I've been wondering. One of my first thoughts as I began to reflect on that ancient, often quoted Christian text came not in relation to these days that we're all living through, not this moment in time that we share, but rather from a time in my life about 45 years ago. A couple of years out of college, I took a part-time job as an activities aide at a school. It was a school for children with quite serious learning and behavioral challenges, many of them having been diagnosed as severely autistic. My degree in philosophy had done little to prepare me for this. I knew nothing relevant, or so I thought. I knew nothing. Certainly had no experience with autistic children. But the school was hiring just about anyone who was willing, was reasonably groomed, and apparently kind and willing to learn. They hired many of us, young people, for just a few hours every afternoon to help out. Well, my initial reaction to these children, many of these children, was something close to fear. Some of their behaviors were, to my experience, having not encountered such kids before, some of their behaviors were bizarre by any usual societal standard. And when it came to a few of the very tightly wound, big and strong kids prone to sudden, uncontrolled violence, my emotional response was closer to fear. But here's the thing. As we got to know these kids as individual human beings, and it didn't take long at all, we really came to love them. Proper precautions, of course, for safety's sake when it came to those who could be violent through no fault of their own. But always those precautions, everything we had to do, was done with compassion and love. Casting out the fear for most of us, most of the time. So how might this apply to these days in which we're living? Maybe it seems to me we could think of love as a sort of redirection, not so much redirecting the fear, but redirecting the energy of fear. Redirecting. Here's what I mean. Our worries, even our fears, for ourselves, for our families and friends, are understandable and real these days. There's no need, no reason to deny this. But when we open our hearts to love, and remembering that a broken heart, a lot of our hearts are broken these days, in the midst of our own struggles, or as we see the struggles of others, a broken heart is an open heart. And when we open our hearts to love, and then express that love in whatever ways we do, redirecting that energy, maybe through a phone call, writing a note, remember mail, actual mail, or perhaps sending a contribution to a food pantry or a shelter, Doctors Without Borders on their front lines, and so on. When we do this, the fear, which often, not always, but often is kind of free-floating these days, a free-floating worry, not always with a specific object, but the fear when we act, manifest our love in particular ways, the fear, at least for a while, in good measure dissipates. Perhaps you've noticed this. It's like clouds broken by the light of the sun. It's as if, and maybe not as if, maybe this is it, that fear and love really cannot coexist in the same body at the same time. Someone in our meditation group this morning pointed out that our strong emotions have physical manifestations. When you think of being afraid, we tense, there's physical manifestation. When we think of love, even just now, imagine someone you love. There's a relaxation. We can't hold both these in our body really at the same time. And since both fear and love are contagious, as we heard in the reading earlier, and she was surely correct, Marianne, in that reading, since both fear and love are contagious, we would do well to choose love whenever we can. And finally, can love, an act of love, tip the scale, as we heard in the reading? I believe it. I've seen it. I see it. I'll bet each of you do too. Think for a moment of some time in your life, a hard or low moment when someone reached out to you. Maybe it was a neighbor, maybe a parent, maybe aunt or uncle, maybe sister or brother. Think of that for a moment. An act of love directed towards you, and what difference it made. In your bones, in your heart, you can feel it. I can. And indeed, we've been seeing and hearing about acts of love every day, tipping the scale during these times, this pandemic. The unbelievably courageous doctors and nurses and aides, everyone in every hospital, whatever their role. Young people delivering food to elders or taking out their trash. The list goes on and on and on. So undeniably, COVID-19 is causing huge amounts of suffering and hardship, sense of dislocation, uncertainty, but it's not the end of us. It isn't. Indeed, it might be the beginning of a new era. This is my hope anyway, an era of at least a little more care and compassion from person to person and around the globe. This lesson, also undeniable now, of our intimate interdependence with every other human being on the planet, with all life. We cannot deny it any longer if we ever could. So maybe perfect love casts out all fear. But I know for certain that imperfect love, which is the kind that most of us imperfect human beings can manifest and show, our imperfect love helps us to live with fear, dissipates much of our fear, because our love reminds us that we are not and never have been alone. It will always be so. Now we're going to sing. It's a song that many of you know, and it's easy if you don't. An old spiritual, it's in our hymn book. There is more love somewhere. More love, more hope, more peace, more joy. There is more, and sing along, please. There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. And I'm going to keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. And I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere. More peace. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. And I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. More hope. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. And I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. And there's more love. There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. And I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. I think we better sing that again. There is more love somewhere. Can I hear you? There is more love somewhere. And I'm gonna keep on, yes, till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There's more love somewhere and right here. To conclude, closing words, a brief poem by Julie Cadwallader Staub. Some of you may have seen it this week. It's titled, Remember. There is no such thing as quantity in love, my mother said, correcting me. No such thing as much love, you can't count it. No such thing as all my love, you can't contain it. Love expands, there's an endless supply. I love you, she said. That's sufficient. Of course, we use these words, much love, all my love, as points of emphasis. But I love what she said. Love expands. There's an endless supply. I love you, she said. That's sufficient. And so, in the spirit of love, this day and every day, always, be well, be safe, take care of one another. Blessed be. Amen. You can say amen.
Amen.
I extinguish these flames, but not the love with which they were lit. The love continues. Our faith, represented by our chalice, continues. May love and faith go with us wherever we go. Peace be with you.